Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Ware, the General Manager for the Project Management Institute of New Zealand. We're delighted to be involved with Engineering New Zealand to bring you tonight's Lightning Series event on a day in the life of a project manager. PMINZ is the leading professional association for project management and the authority for a growing global community of millions of project professionals and individuals who use project management skills. Collectively, these professionals and change makers consistently create better outcomes for businesses, community, and society worldwide. We're proud to share with you tonight 4 very talented project managers, ranging from relatively recent graduates to executives, who will give you an insight into their careers as a project manager. There will be an open Q&A session at the end of the speaker presentations, so please don't be shy. We welcome you to be interactive and ask any questions that you may have. I'm very pleased to welcome our first presenter, Amanda Batchelor.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm quite excited to be here sharing some of my experiences to date. So I've been asked to speak to you for about 10 minutes about a day in the life of a PM, and I'm going to share my views. So look, in the first instance, who am I? My name's Amanda. I'm a project director and I currently work for Naylor Love, which is a tier 1 contractor within our industry. So in terms of how I got here, I trained at the University of Canterbury as a mechanical engineer. I was still a bit fuzzy about what I wanted to do, having done that degree, and so I carried on and did a master's and stayed at university, after which time I went to Becca for about 11 years after that. Now, in my time with Becca, I jumped around a bit, which you'll see starts to become a bit of a trend with my particular skill set going forward. Started as a mechanical engineer with the Becca Power and Industrial section. Then moved through to doing some pulp and paper work into wastewater, and just by generally getting a bit of experience across multiple industrial areas, I sort of slid into the role where I was being the engineer on some of these jobs, but also I was taking responsibility for design management or some of the project management or some of the client facing activities, and that slowly transitioned into me sitting within the project management section of Becca. Now, after 10 years, I made a decision, I guess got shoulder tapped and asked to come to do straight PM. Now, that was a little bit scary for me, in that previously with Becca, I still had the option to go back down the design route and do what I'd been trained in, whereas my role with Rubik's as a project manager was strictly keeping to the non-technical side of managing projects. And in particular, that transition sort of occurred around the same time as our earthquakes, so it put me forward into the building space, whereas typically I'd been sitting in an industrial type role prior to that. Now with Rubik's, I was 8 years with Rubik's, transitioned from project manager to project director to principal with them, and recently this year I have moved on to join a contractor, Naylor Love, and as a project director. And my reasoning, I guess, for doing that is I look around the industry, I can see a lot more design build is going to be happening, and I think there is a slight disconnect between consultant and contractor views on things, and that's something that I'm really passionate about, trying to assist with ironing out those creases so that we can provide a better outcome to our clients. So my experience, I've just got some pictures of typically what I've done. It's been quite broad. I tend to think of myself as a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. With my time with Becca, I've done installations on landfill gas and on wastewater gas schemes powering other buildings. You can see there what's Te Apiti Wind Farm, where I sat with the power section and designed transmission lines, high voltage transmission lines for a while. The wastewater treatment plant at Christchurch there, where I did a number of projects around their digesters, around their wastewater treatment. And sort of in the bottom middle there, just for a little bit of a interest, Sprates Brewery, where I got to help them redesign their glycol system or their cooling system. So my mechanical experience was quite industrial based as opposed to buildings based. From there, and again, because I was sitting in what was a joint project management industrial section, I started picking up a lot of program work. Now, the good thing about program work is it's a great place to learn how to manage projects, and that you see a lot of small projects in a short amount of time. You come across a lot of different problems. You learn an awful lot in a short period of time. And there's 2 projects there. I've done a lot of work for Kaingaora in terms of their upgrade programs, but also when the earthquakes hit, we helped run a team to support them with their earthquake damaged properties. And the middle one there with the digger in it, I was seconded into Sarah for quite some time to help them set up and manage their land clearance and their red zone clearance program of works, which was, I think it's 13,000 houses in total in Christchurch, which needed to come out of, which were red zoned, and something needed to be done with those, and then the land converted into something usable afterwards. Now, my time with Rubik's, I guess, is represented by the two larger pictures on the right hand side. At this point, I'm starting to get a little bit more senior in terms of the projects that I'm taking on, and probably because of my technical background in the industrial sense and appreciation of how different materials or being very specific at times can influence the success or the outcome of a project. I was put onto a number of quite technical buildings, and so the 2 that are shown there, I've done a lot of work for CRIs for ag research around some quite technical and PC2, PC3 glass houses, also some joint facilities with Massey University, which have a lot of labs, a lot of research areas in them. And that rolled quite nicely into my last project, which is just moving into construction now in the bottom right-hand corner, where I was the external project director for the University of Otago Christchurch campus redevelopment, which is an $150 million plus building. They are currently trying to get that out of the ground. Now I've moved across to Naylor Love. Again, I'm still sitting in that quite large project space, in that I'm leading the contractor-led consortium to finish a ministry-led project. So there's 3 schools in the Blenheim area that we need to redo. The community's been waiting for a while for it. There's quite complex in terms of staging. And it's a really nice opportunity from my perspective, because contractor and design team are all one in this particular instance, which is speaking to some of the things that I'm quite passionate about. In terms of what I do, look, this is a matrix. It's called the Eisenhower Matrix, and it is about making sure that you do the things which are important versus urgent, and you do things in the right order. Pretty much all day, this is what I deal with. And that as a project director, I have a large team below me. At an early stage of a project, that team will be smaller. The further in you get, it gets quite large. As an indication, on my last project with the University of Otago, during our detailed design phase, we had 60 full-time consultants working on that detailed design. So you're talking about delegating to people who delegate while still trying to keep tabs on the overall picture. So being very clear on which things to push ahead at what point in time is something that is absolutely crucial for the success of our projects, and pushing those things forward in a way that is best for client is something that I always like to try and do. So just in an everyday sense, I guess some of the actual tasks that I do every day, I talk to my client every day, talk to my design team every day. I'm consistently planning and looking ahead to see what's coming up, and often that's months in advance, and that's some of the approvals that are needed for projects of this size, or some of the inputs that you're going to need to provide to your team so that they can action them, can take 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks to get going. Once you're in construction, obviously you need to monitor how long it's going to take you to order materials to get things here. So often you are jumping backwards and forwards between a long-term view and a short-term view, and making sure that you are just lining up all the pieces so that they should flow nicely into each other. Every single day there is something around cost control. that I'm dealing with. It might be as granular as approving invoices. It could be as high level as trying to set budgets for very large projects like the one that I'm on at the moment. And every single day I'm making decisions consistently, which is why I put this sort of matrix up. So those are sort of some of the tasks that I do, but what's just as important to me is how I see my role as a project director is really to facilitate and to enable the project team to deliver what they need to do. Typically, large projects or even small projects have a group of really great people with specific expertise on it. I like to try and incentivize the team, create behaviours where people are happy to collaborate together, they will communicate by themselves, create a safe environment where we can have really challenging conversations that end up with the best for client outcome. Having said that, when push comes to shove, we also need to be able to hold people to account if they're not performing. We need to be ready to catch those that are having a bit of difficulty. And I think the environment over the last couple of years with COVID has been a really great example of how we can come together to put that forward. And I need to be able to ask good questions at the right time, because at the end of the day, I'm taking responsibility for trying to get our client what it is they need. And often our clients aren't people who do building as a day-to-day basis. Their core business might be delivering education or delivering some sort of food product as opposed to delivering a building. So we need to help translate what we do into something that they can relate to. Look, I thought just to finish off, to give you guys a flavour as to what the job involves, why I enjoy my job. Enjoying my job as opposed to being good at it is something that's really important to me, because we spend so much time at work. I think it's got to be something that you genuinely enjoy going and doing. So working with people, look, I get a real buzz out of seeing a whole team come together, work together, to solve problems. In particular, there's the next one down there, and sort of push forward and get a really good outcome. That's incredibly rewarding from my perspective, particularly when you see it come out in terms of new schools or new research facilities or new hospital facilities. It's a great feeling to know that you contributed to the success of that particular building. Keeping things on track. I quite like being able to push the pieces around, have the overview, be quite hands-on. And for me, variety. You've seen that probably in the project examples that I've given to date. I like new challenges. I like doing new things all the time. I like the ability to move and to tackle things that I haven't in the past. So those are some of the things I enjoy. You'll see the cons are pretty much exactly the same thing. I've put working with people. Sometimes really tough decisions or conversations need to be had, and that can be really, really stressful when things aren't going well, and there's a lot of people impacted. Then that can be a really difficult thing to do, but I think you need to engage and do that with honesty and a bit of genuine intent, and hopefully that gets going. Problem solving, it can be stressful. It can be very stressful when you've got a problem and you don't know how to move it forward, when you're conscious that you're spending the client's money or time. And you've got to make something happen. Keeping things on track. I juggle all day long. I juggle between the tasks that I'm doing. And whilst I enjoy it to a certain degree, sometimes you just have too many balls in the air and you've got to decide which one to drop. And variety. Again, I like variety, but sometimes if you're having a bad day, it's just nice to be faced with things that you know exactly what you're doing and what you do need to do next. So look, that's me. I hope that's given a bit of insight as to roughly what it is I do. I'm going to pass across now to, I think Freya is going to pick up and give a bit of a view as to her experience.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can now all hear me. My name is Freya Lee. I've been working at Frequency for a bit more than 2.5 years now, and have recently upgraded from a graduate to an associate. I'm very glad to have this chance through PMINZ and Engineering New Zealand to share my experience in project management and some opportunities and lessons learned along my journey. First up, just to talk a little bit about myself. I did transport engineering at Auckland University. A few papers on policies, economics, and land use got my eyes on broader outcomes of engineering professions. My volunteering time with Generation Zero also kind of sparked my interest in sustainable growth in urban area. And in my free time, you may find me exploring some short hikes on weekends when the weather allows, or following some live streams of ballet competitions and company classes. So I actually first met Frequency at a career expo held on campus while still at uni, and have since then stepped into the world of project management. Being an engineering student back then, I was very interested in the diverse profile of a consultancy with projects across various sectors such as housing, education, and transport infrastructure. I was attracted to the vital role that a project manager plays and the potential influence they could also have. Now, thinking of my time at work, actually no single day has really been the same. Starting off as the engineers representative under 3910, I learned a lot about construction contracts. The standard administration process trained my technical knowledge, of course, but also my attention to details. But what's more than that is the day-to-day frontline communication with the principals and contractors, which really gave me experience in various real-life scenarios that are not covered by the textbooks. Later on, I had the chance to assist with the delivery of some Ministry of Education school projects. They varied from refurbishment to new builds, and our life in project delivery really had a very different taste as well. Amanda, if you could please. Yes, thank you. Next slide. The previous one in project delivery. Thanks. So how your day goes in delivery space, from my experience, could really be directly linked to the progress on site. And your work is closely connected to all team members, say the client, the architect, the engineers, the contractors. Everything can be on a faster pace. You'd also need to have a good understanding of the overall progress and coordinate accordingly the whole team to push things forward. Next part, I'd like to share my experience within the project control space. My first few months were actually spent working on Puhui to work with motorway upgrade with NZTA. Thanks to the scale of the project, its complex work breakdown structures did actually take me a while to get used to, but among the commercial management services that Frequency is providing, my work included preparing the monthly progress and financial deep dive report for the project director, monitoring all work stream spending and contracts, and also maintaining the project invoice database. I was then also lucky to work on Let's Get Wellington Moving, a program regenerating the multimodal transport network for the Wellington region in the next 2 decades. I basically participated in the development of a full suite of program management documentation. This opportunity not only gave me a chance to build up knowledge around the program level, but also allowed me to have a peek into the early stage of a program in a wholesome aspect. So looking into the current stage, the project I'm right now working on is, I would say, the most exciting one for me so far. Some of you might have already heard of Auckland Light Rail, a project that's aiming at the rail connection between Auckland CBD and the airport, and more importantly, the urban regeneration along this corridor. The project has 6 organizations as listed in the next slide, and we also have already had 7 work streams established. Now, through the second half of 2021, last year, as presented in the next slide, thank you, Amanda, ALR establishment unit back then presented an IBC indicative business case for the light rail connection between city centre and Mangali, with 3 shortlisted options, as you may already see on the sides. The first one is light rail being a modern tram at ground level, or a light metro fully underground. And lastly, we have a partially tunneled light rail included in the shortlisted options. Now, early this year, the tunneled light rail has been selected as the preferred option, using a mix of tunneling and surface light rail. The route, as you can see on the map, would cover the uni campus in town, following the corridor between Dominion and Sandringham Road towards Mount Roskill, where the train would come to ground level, then links up Onehunga, Mangali, and eventually towards the airport. If you look at the top of the map, you might notice some future connection towards North Shore is also proposed here. Talking about myself and our team, Frequency offers a suite of PMO services to our project, and I work alongside the commercial part of the team. My daily tasks would mostly include commercial coordination within the project team and the external support and suppliers, managing financial matters such as the project invoicing process, month-end reporting, and some spending reconciliation. You would also find me working closely with our commercial manager and contract manager on forecasting and contract positions. The team is currently not only in the heat of end of financial year, but also transitioning the project from Wahakutahi to the Ministry of Transport since the latest government funding announcement. This special time really brings along lots of challenging tasks that are testing my resilience. But at the same time, I'm also learning tons from my awesome teammates, as in both professional knowledge and my soft skills. Looking back though, there are some lessons I would like to share with you today as well. Heading into the project management field while enjoying the constant new knowledge, I found it also important to know your learning curve. I want to always remind myself to be patient if there is some frustration at the beginning, but also I want to remain humble and curious when you feel competent. I see networking as an important part in project management, and I embraced all parts and all types of works and projects that came along my way, exploring as much as I can. I think there would be a time in the future that I would like to aim for a specialization, perhaps in a specific type of project or area of works within project management. So that's all from me. And on the last page of my slides, I've attached a QR code to my LinkedIn page in case any of you have questions or would like just to reach out. I will now hand over to Matthew.
Thanks, Freya. Kia ora koutou. My name's Matthew. I'm originally from Auckland, but now based in Wellington, the capital of New Zealand, obviously. So just a bit about my background and career. I've actually done a few things differently. Initially studied as a mechanical engineer, went into architectural designing, and fairly quickly found myself in the process industry, and that led me into my project management career. So yeah, thanks to Sarah and for Engineering New Zealand to help host this. I'll jump into my next slide, please. And this is really just giving me a bit of a background of where I've come from. Had lots of jobs, so lots of different opportunities and experiences. So the picture on the left-hand side down there is the Auckland Town Hall. That's where I started some of my work with the City Council. Just going back to that original first slide, yeah, thanks. Worked in electrical engineering and as a draftsman. ended up in 1993 in the dairy industry. That's where I moved to milk powder plants and project management, pasteurizers, and those types of food industries. Then I actually had a change where I did some work in construction in the retirement sector, but then fairly quickly found I had an opportunity in Australia. So that's when I moved to Brisbane and then Melbourne. So I'll go through to my next slide, please. That just goes through to, you're back to New Zealand, did a full turnkey greenfield powder plant in Balclutha, worked with Open Country Dairy in the Waikato. They also had 3 sites across New Zealand. Then I did another change where I was a geothermal steam pipe inspector, inspecting all the welds, so a lot of quality assurance there. Moved to Christchurch and worked as the senior project manager in plumbing and drainage on the RSIC building in Christchurch. Stayed in Christchurch, did asset management, which was really interesting. Another sort of what I would call aspect of my career that it was again a slightly different turn, which has also led me into this role where I'm working at Parliament as a senior project manager, and there's also some work I did at MB. Next slide, thanks. So there's the town hall. It's quite an interesting building. That wall that you're looking at actually has a ½ degree angle because it was just built back in the day in 1905, I think it was, alongside the actual street, whereas the builders didn't really look at using a lot of plans. They just built what they could see. And it was interesting too that the floor and the whole building was not very well designed seismically, which is an interesting aspect because almost come full circle with the work that I'm doing where I'm working at Parliament on public buildings and heritage buildings. Next slide, thanks. And there's the Tasman Pulp and Paper Mill, which is actually closed down now. That was a huge part of, I guess, some of my learnings as a contract engineer draftsman, doing work on electrical drawings and process drawings. Yeah, quite interesting amount of things that I learned very, very, very quickly in the contract space as opposed to a full-time role. Next slide, thanks. So getting into the dairy industry in 1993, so moving from Auckland to the Waikato, and we were doing projects around the country. This is actually the largest, I believe it's the largest dairy site in the world. They have about 10 smaller factories in that one site, and they not only take a lot of the milk, rail milk from the Hawke's Bay, process it into powder and cheeses, and they also have cogen plants, so a lot of activity there. Back in the day when you used to fly from the South Island across Taranaki, you could apparently see some of the milk flowing out to the sea before they did some more environmental work. So there's a lot of background and history in that. And in fact, that's one of the projects where one of the designers I was working with had made some fatal errors in the building. And so I went to site and managed some of the support structures to make sure that the building wasn't, or the equipment wasn't actually falling down. Next slide, thanks. Still in the dairy industry, worked for Tetra Pak and a few other companies. The picture that you actually see is an UHT packing plant. It goes from the sterilizer, homogenizer, aseptic day tank, and then into the UHT packing lines, which of course is your cardboard packs that you buy in the supermarket. Next slide, thanks. And this is a multi-level apartment building, as I mentioned, in the retirement sector in Tauranga. So you can probably see straight away that I've started to move from designing project management, but then also changing industries as well. I actually found in the dairy and process engineering industries, there was a lot of hard work. A lot of the sites were away from urban towns. So you're in the middle of nowhere sometimes. So I found that getting back into a more people-focused type of building is quite important for family reasons and for sustainability of my own health and well-being. Next slide, thanks. This is a really interesting project we did in Australia where the company took a big risk. We were processing a lot of dairy waste through an anaerobic anaerobic digester, which created biogas. We took the biogas, cleaned it up, and put it through some of these two big engines. Now, the company that actually sold us these engines hadn't really done any successful projects before. There's some companies out there like Jenbacher and Deutz, American and German machinery that's really well developed. But these Chinese engines, even though they're very good engines, they had very poor control systems. And one of the reasons why I found this project really interesting is because we had some legal problems with a contractor who was based in Queensland. And I actually ended up flying to China to talk to the original manufacturers about how their process systems worked. And we got it working really well. We actually won a project management award on this particular project, even though after I left the company a few years later, they ripped it out and they just co-fired the coal boiler. So it was great learnings, but it's just unfortunate that the company decided to go in a different direction. Next slide, thanks. And again, on the same site where we had a steam turbine, which was a huge amount of engineering process and also project management. And we had this company supplied from the US of A. And this is to a military standard specification. So there's a lot of really close tolerances required, heavily mechanical and engineering based. And what I loved about this particular project was that it was fully automatic. Basically, when all the things were turned on or left behind, it just started up itself and everything was just perfect, as opposed to the biogas engine where everything was very, very manual. And of course, in China, they have a lot of systems, but they have also a lot of cheap labor where they can actually take people and look after the operations of the machinery. This project, coming back into New Zealand now, this is near Bachelor. When we started, it was basically a grass paddock. So we had to put in a lot of infrastructure, electrical, mechanical, water, wastewater, even the roading we had to improve. And now it's being run and owned by Danone, and it's basically a nutritionals powder plant. Yeah, so that was a really interesting project because there was a bit of, we knew we were going to be late, and I decided to actually do that project anyway. I knew it was going to be a lot of hard work, but I knew it was going to be character defining stuff. So we managed to complete it, but it was a couple of months late. As I say, we were probably a couple of months late starting as well. This was the steam piping where I was a welding inspector. Next slide, thanks. Near Taupo. And this is the RSIC building in Canterbury. Next slide, thanks. And here we are at Parliament. One of the major projects I'm working on at the moment is the beehive refurbishment. It's about 6 or 7 years worth of program, because we're having to work around obviously the users of the precinct, which are ministers and the Prime Minister up on level 9. And we've also just been announced, there's a major couple of buildings going out to the west of that picture where we're building new buildings. Next slide. And that's another view of the beehive. See all of those lower level windows. We're going through the replacement of them in the next 2 years. And the reason we can do that is because they're mostly public spaces. So we don't interrupt so much office space. Next slide, thanks. Oh, there's one slide missing, but that's okay. Oh, there it is. So just a quick summary. The advantages of my work, having traveled a lot of the world, I got a real mix of work and lots of learnt, and it gives a great resilience, quite a few conflict resolution experiences. The disadvantages, of course, is hard to keep friends and family close. The job continuity is not great, and it costs a lot of money. So yeah, happy to answer any more questions. And if anyone wants to contact me later, then please contact Sarah at PMINZ. Thank you. Now on to Varun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Varun Keri tōku ingoa, no inia hau. Good evening. My name is Varun Carey. I'm an assistant project manager working at Becca. If for those guys who don't know what Becca is, it's a professional services consulting firm. So it's got offices all throughout the country, and I'm from the Dunedin office. Although I'm currently working in a client office based in Ohakia near Palmerston North. Getting into a bit of introduction, so probably those photos would give you a brief idea of what I like to do outside of work. Yeah, so I like adventure. Yeah, just the photo in the middle is me skydiving. A bit of background into how I got to where I am now. So like Amanda and Matt, it seems like there's a bunch of mechanical engineers turned project managers on the call today. So I started off as a bachelor in mechanical engineering. That was back in India. And then I was working as a design engineer at Jacobs Engineering. So where I was involved with the mechanical design of manufacturing machines that produce paper and pulp products. So did that for a couple of years, and that was around the same time when my interest shifted towards project management. And then I've moved to New Zealand right before COVID, actually. So that was a bit of fortunate times for me. And then I did my Master of Engineering Management at the at University of Auckland. Finished that and straight and got into Becca early last year. I mean, mid last year. Around May. So that's how I've grown into where I am currently. Although I don't have a lot of experience, I've tried to put into a nutshell of what I do, and also because I will not be able to share a lot of project details given the confidentiality of where I'm currently. So in a nutshell, what I think project management is it's an important skill that everyone, I think, has naturally. That's up to a certain extent, and it's actually, when you look back at it, it's quite similar to what you would do when, say, probably you're doing an assignment at uni. So it's an iterative process. So starting off on the slide, when you see the top left, so you first plan what you want to do, and then, say, if it's an assignment, you would probably plan how you want to structure it and what you would want to write into it. And then the next part would be how you would want to write and what you would like to involve in each of those sections as well. So it's quite similar to how a project is executed. So first you plan and you understand the scope, costs, and the quality and the expectations of the client. And then you then get into doing the project as well. And yeah, like Amanda and Matt and Freya have mentioned, it's quite an iterative process, and how it's done on a regular basis is what brings the quality into it. So the next one would be checking what you've done. Sorry, Amanda, just staying on the same slide. So the next process would be checking it. So if it's reached the quality that was expected and that was promised. So coming back to your assignment example, if it's when you're graded, you understand where you are with respect to what expectations that were set by the person who graded it. So it's probably a good, I guess, benchmark for you to understand what's required and where you stand and the gaps that lie in between. So the last one would be acting. So that's how will I improve the process that goes into further iterations or further projects or further assignments. So this is, yeah, technically it's called a PDCA cycle. Then it's quite similar to what, like I said, you can find analogies between technical project management terms and yeah, usual experience, what you find. So a bit of so going on to the next slide, Amanda. So I've put into a few things of what I like about project management. So I guess it's already been touched upon by Amanda as well. So the first one would probably be variety, where with no two projects being the same, you always tend to learn something new. So across clients and across projects, across locations, whenever there's a change in the minute factors affecting a project, you've got to be really careful in terms of how you would execute it and how you would project manage it as well. Having said that, even if there's a bit of similarity between repetitive projects, there's no space for complacency when you're a project manager, because you've always got to be on your toes and understand what's coming ahead, because it always helps to understand how you need to be prepared for what lies in front of you. One of the other things is, for the reason why I incline myself towards project management is because you get a complete picture of the project. So if you're involved in just a technical capability, you're more often than not restricted by how much you can do. But with a project management role, you tend to get the overall picture, and you can see the process flow of how things are done. So for example, if you're in a construction project, you get to see it from say design until handover, so you can see it evolve. And yeah, project management gives you that flexibility of having a look at it and influencing the project. uh, at the same time, having said that, you've got to be careful of the expectations that are set by the various stakeholders that are involved in a project. So like I said, no two projects are the same. So you've got to be careful how the same things are perceived by different lenses or different stakeholders. So, for example, if you're looking at something like Matt's project, where you're doing the beehive refurbishment, so there's a whole lot of stakeholders that are involved in that project. So you've got to be wary of how it would impact somebody like the Prime Minister, or somebody that's nowhere related to the building, but would still perceive it and use it on day-to-day basis. So it's about managing those expectations between stakeholders that I thought would really I would be interested in, and that's also one of the reason why I chose to come into the field of project management as well. One of the other I guess factors that usually influences people towards project management, what I think is you're not bound by what you can do. So if you build a good project management skill set, you can you don't have to necessarily stay in the same sort of industry or the sector all through your life. So you can go beyond what you're doing. So although all of us are involved in construction and construction activities, there's heaps of project managers that are in other sectors as well, like banking and in IT as well. Although the functional roles and what might I mean, the wording might change, but essentially the skill set and the expertise that you bring in as a project manager would essentially be the same across those sectors as well. So having said that, there's no, because of these factors, I see that you wouldn't get bored in your job as a project manager. So I guess of a few students who might be there thinking, okay, if somebody's doing the same thing for 10 years or 12 years, how did they not get bored of it? So like I said, it's because you keep evolving, and you keep building your skill set through the different projects that you do. And like I said, it's an ever evolving process. So one of the other examples that I wanted to bring in before I close out is from one of the previous projects that I did when I started last year. So there was this water treatment plant close to Dunedin, where I did a lot of construction monitoring and digital delivery in reporting. So that's one thing that I found that can get better as we go ahead. So for those of you who are looking at getting into the profession and the skills and along with your certifications and your degrees, you might want to build on the digital aspect as well, because like we all know how the world's evolving, especially due to COVID and all the restrictions. It's really important to have a good skill set on digital delivery, and because that will help you a lot going forward. And it's quite generic as well, so it doesn't have to end with either project management. So there's a lot of digital tools that are being used in say asset management or the other aspects in project management. So that's one thing that I would want to emphasize on. Having said having said that, you still need to be aware of what's going on in an overall aspect. So yeah, so I would probably want to stop here and probably go ahead to take a few questions, I guess, because we've are we doing good on time, Sarah?
Yes, no, we're good. Thank you, Varun. And many
Awesome.
thanks also to Amanda, Freya and Matthew for sharing with us. It's great to have your knowledge, experience and insight. We do have some great questions coming through, and please feel free to keep adding to the Q&A. The first question is for Amanda. Amanda, generally speaking, would you need to take a pay cut or need to start from scratch if you were to jump from a technical to a management role?
I never did, is my experience. Look, I think it depends. I get nervous if I start getting cornered into a specialist role. I guess you've seen that, and that I've jumped sideways through my projects. In my experience, I think the industry is good from a consulting perspective and also from the construction perspective in recognising that there is value in having technical specialists as much as there is having value in generalist specialists, and I probably fit more in the second category. I think to transition without taking a pay cut, you'll need to be able to slide your perspective on a project from the detailed up to the high level view very easily, because otherwise you're going to get stuck prioritizing the wrong things. So if you think that you are capable of doing that, then absolutely, I think it's an easy transition to make. Having said that, if you have spent 30 years being a specialist in one particular area in a technical sense, and then try to transition through into a management one, there's probably going to be a bit of a differential as to what that pay looks like. So, and that's probably where my fear, I said, in terms of being cornered, is there was always felt like a natural time for me to move from one role to the other. So
it's quite an interesting.
Yeah,
thanks, Amanda. It's quite an interesting question, because in New Zealand we do often have duplicity, whereas we're working as engineers and project managers. In places like Australia, there's a lot more support. People generally have those more specific roles. And one thing I might also add is that in management, you tend to get paid more. So it doesn't take long to get back up to that speed.
Correct.
Okay, I'll go on here for Varun. How useful is your Masters of Engineering Management to your career?
Yeah, it's quite good actually, because it's one of the courses that I found was a great bridge between engineering and management. So for those of you who might not be aware, it's like a course that is offered by the School of Engineering as well as the business school. So you tend to pick up skills from both facets, and then I found that to be a really good bridge. Like I said, given that I had experience in a similar field back in India, and then having done that course, I found I gelled really well into the project management field when I took that course as well. So you've got similar courses across nations, but I guess that if you're looking at doing that, I would probably have a bit of work experience added to it, so that you can get the most out of it, instead of just jumping straight into it after doing a bachelor's.
Excellent. A question here for Freya. Freya, does it have to be long hours all the time working as a project manager?
Well, short answer is that definitely depends on the situation that you're in. I would absolutely say there's peak and trough when it comes to project work. When it comes to really high pace taking place in your workplace, then absolutely there might be some extra effort needed to be put in place to have things progressing as per plan or as the team wants. But you'll also be able to find as well some other time when things get a bit quieter. So overall, I would say you do get a bit more flexibility in there, and more importantly, I guess for us in this field, it is also a reminder for us to know how to balance your hours and also your time and effort when it comes to a whole piece of project going on.
Excellent, thanks Freya. Question here from Matthew. What are the qualities of a successful PM? Or I guess, how will you know you did a good job? PMs tend to press the engineers and designers on time a lot without understanding why, say the variation design change takes time.
It's a really interesting question because it all depends. I did go to a really good conference in Australia where a gentleman came down and spoke about 3 things as measures of success. That is, if you're within 25% of the budget, and he was talking about mega projects, but if you're within 25% of the budget, within 25% of the time estimation, and if your client's happy. So those 3 simple things is what I use to gauge whether or not I'm going down the right path or whether I need to actually do some modifications. And I wouldn't say that you would ever look at a project as being a failure, because what you should be doing on a monthly or a regular basis is looking at some of the issues, some of the risks, and try and mitigate those risks before things turn into disaster.
Excellent. Question here for you, Amanda. Have you had conflict management experience as a manager director?
Conflict is part of my day-to-day role. I think when I talked about best for client is what we try to deliver for our projects. Now, we have multiple parties who are coming together to try and deliver that. And if you ask all of those parties to ask what they would prefer to do within their role, there will always be gaps and there will always be crossovers in terms of what people would prefer to do from their own organisational risk profile or from their own preference, or in terms of how they can make the most money or what their view on things is. So I think I referred to myself as a facilitator in that trying to help those conversations happen in a useful way is one of the biggest things that I spend my time doing. Now, sometimes ideally you want to encourage your team to be happy enough to have those hard conversations. Equally, if that's not going right, then yes, we need to step in and we need to actually guide the train down the right set of rails. So look, that's something that's really tricky for me. I'm not naturally someone who picks an argument. I would prefer for things to be happy all the time, but I try to live by the mantra and remind myself all the time, nobody got out of bed this morning intending to come to work and make everybody else's life a misery. So there's usually a reason for why they are putting forward the view that they are. And I think seeking to understand those perspectives and the drivers behind it can often help unpick those conversations and make them a bit easier, take some of the emotion out of it, take some of the heat out of it. And if you provide that safe environment for people to have honest conversations, then they are more prepared to engage in a meaningful fashion. So that's the way I like to look at it. Others have different approaches, but that's what works for me.
Excellent, thank you. I've got one here which is probably open to any of you. It says, do any of you think that there is any value knowing about the New Zealand engineering contract, NEC? I ask this because this is a well-structured method for contract management.
I might just make one comment. It is becoming more used, and there is also 3910, NZ 3910 review happening right at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves, but I personally haven't used one myself. So yeah.
Something to add from my side a little bit. As mentioned in the slides, I primarily worked under 3910, but absolutely agree with you, Matthew, that NEC apparently is another mainstream documentation set for construction contract, and I personally have heard from a lot of colleagues mentioning NEC can help people's understanding of construction contracts a lot better as well, and how 3910 potentially can also borrow a couple of lessons learned from NCC and NEC as well. So agree that it absolutely would be helpful to gain some knowledge from that part as well.
Can I chip in there as well, if I might, Sarah? I think talking about different contract forms, there's a way of managing the risk associated with that project by doing that, and some of those contract forms facilitate expectations to be more clearly communicated to the various parties within a project. But anytime you're walking into a meeting with the contract tucked under your arm, you're already at the point where really, irrespective of what the contract is, that's not going to solve your problem. Ideally, that is what underpins what you're doing, but the way that you drive your team and the way that you work together should hopefully manage most of those issues out without needing to go back and look at a contract clause.
Totally agree.
Just to sort it out.
Excellent. Another question for you, Amanda. When would you suggest a good time would be to transition into project management if you're currently on a technical learning journey?
I guess I pushed sideways when I felt like I was starting to restrict my options in terms of where I could go next. Now, that was based on gut feel, which probably doesn't help you, but if you depending on what your employment situation is, like I had the advantage of being with Becca, which was a multi, so it was very easy for me to slide sideways. Now, when I say very easy, my first slide sideways, I was working on transmission lines, and I decided I'd had enough of transmission lines, and because I was in the power and industrial section, I got sent on secondment to same pulp and paper mill actually that Matthew's worked on. It was supposed to be a 3-week role. Once I got up there, they offered me a year secondment for 18 months. And I effectively don't always do this to your employers, but refuse to come back to Wellington. And that was my way of pushing out. Now, I think you need to find people who support you. And I had a couple of really good mentors who helped me find the right time to step sideways when I wanted to do that. Also, I think if you are looking at PM, talk to your employer, because often they'll have opportunities where you can start to broaden your own skill set within the constraints or within the boundaries of your existing role. And things like if you're in a technical role, starting to get into some of the contract administration or into an engineer's rep type role is often a really good stepping stone into a straight PM role, and it gives you the opportunity to sort of try it out and see if actually that's the space that you want to be working in before you sort of push one way or the other. So hopefully that helps.
If I can just add on to it, Sarah. So I've actually had this dilemma as well before moving in, because I thought I don't have a lot of experience to get into the project management, but what I found out when I did that was that you actually learn the job as well. So you don't have to know everything before you get into project management. So it's, like I said, it's an ever-evolving process. So yeah, so those are some great points that Amanda mentioned as well, that you can get a feel of how things are, and then probably talk to somebody who's already into project management, understand their role and what comes along with it, the pros and the cons. And then if you think that's the right time, or if you think that's what you want going forward, then I guess that it's a great pathway, I would say, instead of waiting for a specific years of experience and then getting onto it. So it's all about what you want and how you'd like to structure your career.
Excellent. I'll open this one to the panel. The question is, in general, is a project manager paid more than a technical engineer on the same experience level?
Really depends. I mean, some technical engineers get paid a hell of a lot of money. You know, if they're in sort of strategy, software development, and that sort of area, it really, I think, comes down to how many other people are working in that particular space. So if you've got lots of people and there's not a lot of demand for, let's say, a project director, then you might be best to stay in that technical space. So it really depends. Know what your market is doing, and then try and focus on what you want to do and what you love doing.
I agree with Matthew. I think he's hit that one on the head. And I think the comment about doing what you enjoy is a really important one. Yep. Because again, we spend so much of our time doing this that you don't want to come home at the end of the week feeling bad about your job, right? So base where you're going on what you enjoy, not on necessarily what you think is going to pay slightly extra, because it might not be the silver bullet that you're looking for.
Great. So question for Amanda. As a former designer, how did the problems you solved change when you moved across, and how transferable were the skills you learned through engineering design?
Look, I think if you're good at problem solving in a design sense, you're likely to be good at problem solving in a management sense as well. I like the concept that one size fits all means one size fits none. So whatever solution I'm looking to try and implement, whether it's technical or whether it's from a management or a process perspective, then, and Varun touched on this quite nicely in this presentation, I think making sure that it's appropriate for what you're trying to do at the time is one of the key things. So being able to work through a process, understanding what are the really critical things to pay attention to in a design solution. You might have a number of variables, understanding which ones of those are really important and which ones are just sort of you can deal with afterwards. That's exactly the same as what you would do in a management sense, where you've got a bunch of things that need to be done and you need to be able to prioritize those. The other thing, communication. It doesn't matter how good you are technically or how good you are at being able to set up processes. If you can't communicate that intent and get people to come on the journey with you, then either way, as a designer or as a manager, you're not going to be as successful as what you could be.
Excellent. I'll open this up to the panel. So have you ever applied successfully for a role that you didn't meet the applicant criteria for? If so, how did you approach the interview?
I would suggest that it's really about the job, not so much the description but more about what is the job entailing. You know, is it a specific type of industry? Does it involve lots of people? And zone in on those sorts of things. So do your research on not just the company, but also what do they do and what do they aspire to have successful projects look like. And so if you really show that you've done some research on the company, and you engage with what the people that in that company do from a project management point of view, then they'll see that. So for instance, I'll give you a real quick example. When I spoke to the people up here at Parliament, they talked about what would I do on my first day. And so I said, well, I'd walk a lot of the places in the buildings, talk to people, try and understand what makes them happy in their work and their work environment. So for instance, you know, is the air conditioning working at the correct temperature, and is the lighting correct? And, you know, do they have any access problems? Simple stuff like that. And when I mentioned those sorts of very, very quick, simple things, it really got a lot of favors, I guess.
Look, I'd like to chip in too. It's not a situation I've ever had to apply for myself, but I have employed people, I guess, in that sense. And look, I'll give an example. I've recently employed a cadet here, and I think the Naylor Love way of doing things is we have some very strong values, and the very clear message from the organisation here is that as long as the person we are employing displays the values that we want to see within our team, then we can train the rest. So I think understanding what sort of organisation you're working for, what is going to be important to them, lacking specific skills, I would suggest comes secondary to having the right attitude and the right willingness to come to the party, in my experience.
Absolutely agree with Amanda. So it's what I think in interviews, it's not more about if you've got the right degree or not, but if it's more the right fit that the company looks for and the intent behind an applicant as well. So I've found this that when I interact with people from the company and get to know the company's working culture or how I would fit in, I've been, I guess, much more successful than if I've just looked at the job description and submitted my application to it. So it's about that background work that you do along with what the skills and the degree that you possess. So yeah, I would like to say just improve those networking and communication skills and get a feel of how the company would if you would be a good fit into the company, and vice versa as well, because more often than not, interviews are just about looking at the intent and the fit of the applicant
If I may add a tiny little bit more, there's just a phrase that I suddenly recalled from some conversation I've had previously with our seniors, which is transferable skills. Sometimes perhaps you don't even realize what you are capable of, but some people might already see it in you. So think about it and see how you might actually already fit into that space.
I'll open this up to the panel. Has your gender or ethnicity ever been an issue for you as a project manager?
Who wants to go first? I'll go first. Look, I started my mechanical engineering degree. I worked part-time to support that. I worked in a manufacturing plant with 130 employees where I was the only female. I worked a night shift where that company, as a means of giving back to the community, specifically employed people coming out of prison to give them their first jobs. And so when I was 18 going through university, I worked half a night shift every night with not your usual characters, I guess, where I was the only girl at that point in that environment. And look, there is, I think, still unconscious bias kicking around, but really people are people. Sometimes they do it deliberately, sometimes they don't. I think as long as you're prepared to walk the walk yourself, eventually somebody will recognize that. And look, if you're sitting in a company, dare I say it, where that is an issue, perhaps the question is that the right place to be, or actually is there somewhere better that would better appreciate my skills? So I think just make sure you value yourself, make sure you understand that you are actually doing the right things for the right reasons, believe in yourself, and that should take care of most of it. Might still happen, but I guess doing that, the other side of that for me is I probably get more upset when I see it happen to other people than if I'm on the receiving end myself. And I think particularly at a director role, if I see that sort of behaviour happening on my projects or within my working group, then I will very quickly act to draw it to whoever's attention it is and try and support people through that. I think we've got an obligation to do that where possible.
I guess I could also add a little bit more towards that question. Personally, I really didn't have too much trouble along my time, either in back at uni or at work, but I absolutely understand the question that's being addressed, and also, as Amanda mentioned, sometimes when you do see what might be happening around the world, or even not to yourself but to others, it might be giving you a bit of a negative feeling. But for me, actually, when I was back at uni, I actually did some aeronautical engineering part of thing as well. And during that time, a full lecture hall could be all of boys with just a handful of girls. For me, I didn't see that as a disadvantage or anything like that, but rather just be yourself. And after I started working, I also heavily got engaged with, for example, Women in Engineering at Auckland Uni, which is a sharing platform with a lot of girls at university. And then under PMINZ, there's also Women in Project Management. There are a lot of platforms like these that basically advocate for people within, say, sharing some similar interests or experience. So some insights from me is really just to do what you think is aligned with your values and your purpose, and be able to raise your voice when that's necessary. And I think that is really some values that I do adhere to as well myself.
Actually, I'm going to jump back in here. Freya, I'm going to assume you don't have kids. I don't have kids.
Yeah.
No, and so look, I think maybe Matthew might be able to comment on this. You mentioned family. I think potentially it's less about prejudice in the job, but perhaps about broader society expectations about what happens outside of work, which puts pressure on female colleagues more than the actual work environment itself. That's what I've seen, I think.
We have run over time, but I will give the panelists a moment each if they would like, if there's any sort of last sort of parting words that they would like to share before we go. Amanda, if we go with you first.
Yeah, look, thank you everybody for joining. It's really nice to be able to share our experiences. I can see some questions here that haven't been answered. So just look, if you want to get in touch, I'm happy to answer those questions. Give me a tap on the shoulder on LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to follow up. But otherwise, thanks to Sarah and Co for organising it. It's great to be able to offer some advice to everybody out there as you're transitioning or considering a transition, if that's the case, into PM. So thank you.
Freya?
Thanks, Sarah. Same, it's really great fun to join this speaking opportunity with the other great panel speakers, and also to see some real life questions from all the audience. For me, I would say still in the project management, no matter which field or type of project you're in, there's so much to learn, so much to experience, and it can be a very exciting journey, at least judging from my short experience so far. And I personally look forward to a lot more to happen within the field. And I think if for those who are interested in this area of works, get your eyes peeled and keep learning what's happening, and perhaps one day, who knows?
Matthew?
Kia ora. One of the things that I've seen in some of these questions too is talking about certifications. So don't let that rule your world. It's important to have some qualifications, and they're quite often transferable. I actually did mechanical engineering at a technical level, and then got into all my work. Didn't do a degree until I did my master's about 10 years ago. That was a master's in business. And that certainly helped me develop some of my business skills and general knowledge. But yeah, really just work on what you love doing, and the certifications probably come later. So that's what I would say. But thanks for everyone being here, and I'm happy to contact with people if they had any specific questions. Thank you. Mā te wā.
Varun?
Yep, just iterating what the others have said as well. So great job for sticking around for so long. Sorry, a few questions were left unanswered, but yeah, I'm sure we can all be approached on LinkedIn, and we can answer those for you. And the only thing that I would say is don't be afraid to explore. Just if you have any questions, just make sure you ask it to the right people. They might not have the answers, but they'll make sure they direct you or assist you with that. So yep, great. And yeah, looking forward to a few more questions coming my way if that's all right. And yep, best wishes for everybody in whatever they do.
Thanks, Varun. Thanks to our amazing panelists, Amanda, Freya, Matthew, and Varun. And thank you all for joining us this evening. We hope that you've taken away some great insight from what the panelists have had to share. Please feel free to reach out to us at PMINZ if we can be at all helpful in terms of assisting you along your journey. Otherwise, have a lovely evening.